Welcome back to Mike's Monsters. We are looking at the Tamashii Nations SH Monster Arts King Ghidorah 2019 Special Color Edition from Godzilla King of the Monsters 2019. And that's a lot to say. It's a reissue from a previous release with a bright and shiny new paint application. The massive box it comes in features an awesome foil print on Ghidorah's name, giving a nice shiny reflection. The box also features a bunch of standard pose shots of the figure and a nice recreation of one of the scenes from the actual film. I am lucky to have owned the original figure for the last few months, so I'm able to compare this bright and shiny new upgraded release. Immediately you can see this thing really shines. This bad boy is so impressive and also kinda challenging to work with. If you have the previous release, you'll likely understand, but we will get to those details later in the video. This figure is extremely articulated, but also limited in what it can do. The necks and tails have a crazy amount of range and posability. You can get a lot of snake-like serpentine type of poses like he had in the film, even enough to kind of wrap around Godzilla, for example. With this though, you can pop off a head or a neck if you just push it too far, but it's super easy to push right back in the peg, so I don't really see this as an issue. The heads all have a spin rotation so you can get a good up and down range. The jaws have really good articulation, allowing you to open the mouths, though some may be a little stiff, which my middle head is. With some work though, you can get them to open up wide. The wings are where it gets to be interesting. They have some movement up and down and back and forth, but they weigh a lot and need to be left on the peg stands that are supplied. I've seen a few collectors manage to pose the wings without the stands, but I have not, and I do not want to risk letting it topple over. The wings give the figure a weird weight distribution, which is why the stands are included. I think the wings look insane and capture the imposing form that Ghidorah has throughout the film. It's one of those figures that once you pose on your shelf, you leave it alone to admire, which is basically how I do with all my figures anyway, so that's not really a problem for me, but I can see it bothering some people. The wings sit on a peg with an arm on it that is able to swivel around and move, but like I mentioned, the wings can only get a few poses from them due to the weight. Side note, the edges on this figure are really freaking sharp, so be careful you don't stab yourself when you're working with this beast. You can see the tails have a good range of motion, but also have a point where they pop off if not careful. Again, it's really easy to push these back in. You may also notice the weight kicking in on this guy while I'm working with him here, and he slowly starts to lean forward. This is where those stands become absolutely necessary at times. The legs and feet have a nice bit of motion, and mainly will be used to help stand the figure up along with those stands provided. This is one of those things that you should keep the most awareness on, as you don't want this figure to fall over and break on you. But I think that's not that big of an issue in the long run. There is fantastic detail on this figure all around. The sculpt is awesome. It's really way more impressive in person. I don't think any photos have really done this thing justice, because I'm constantly catching myself admiring this figure on my shelf. I even felt the same way about the original release. Once I finally had my hands on one, I was even more impressed. And now let's compare the two releases. The original release doesn't have the sheen and shine that the new paint application brings out on the new Special Color Edition. It's a yellowish orange with a lot of flat details. There isn't a lot of highlights on it, somewhat spots of dark airbrushing on it to bring out the details though. It could have used another set of highlights or even maybe some backwash to help it stand out more, but it still has a really great sculpt. I'm sure there's been a lot of great customs that do exactly that. But still, paint application aside, this figure was an awesome release and very welcome on my shelf. The new Special Color Edition for me moves a lot smoother and easier, and the wings hold in a lot better. My original release was very stiff, and one of the wings would not sit in very well. Also, one of the heads constantly popped off, as well as the tail, but not in the same spot as the Special Color Edition. I'm not sure if the joints are tighter or somehow smoother, but everything seems to look exactly the same from what I can see in the build. Between both, they look like they've just been repainted, but I don't know if there's been tightening or loosening. I know that sounds like it's been the opposite of each other, like it sounds tighter or it sounds looser, but I don't know what's going on there, but my new release feels a heck of a lot better than the old one, though I cannot see the difference. This could also just be me getting lucky with a really good figure, but I don't think that's the case from a few of the other reviews I've watched. And that's not to say this previous release was a bad figure. I think it's still fantastic and impressive. Both releases come out to being about the same amount of weight too, give or take a few tiny ounces here or there. So I'm not entirely sure what's changed. This Monster Arts figure is massive, and it's frankly probably the biggest figure in my collection, even dwarfing some of my X Plus statues. Some might call it a shelf hog too. That doesn't mean it was a bad thing, because in the film he was massive. Godzilla, who was a tank in the MonsterVerse films, is a teeny tiny little Monster Arts figure compared to the three-headed monster. Kong is even smaller. And Monster Zero's soul in robot form, Mechagodzilla, who is quite a large Monster Arts figure on his own, is small compared to this body as well. Ghidorah here may actually be a little larger than the films, but I think the figure is so damn imposing that I think it helps. Much like previous Monster Arts releases like Rathalos, or even possibly Rodan and Mothra from the Monsterverse, they're meant to be left on their stands posed in one kind of position. I don't mind that, as that's how I set up my collection. I can see some wishing there was more articulation with posing, but I don't think it's a problem. I think this Ghidorah is honestly a must-have for Monster Arts collectors. It is, admittedly, a spendy figure, but one I think you'll be very impressed with once you make that purchase. It is even more impressive in hand, and if you know what you're getting into, I think you'll be extremely happy with it. It photographs beautifully, and it's pretty much the Ghidorah figure I think I've wanted my entire life. You can grab this Tamashii Nations SH Monster Arts King Ghidorah 2019 Special Color Edition at most online retailers that sell collectibles. If there were anything I would complain about or critique, it would be that it kind of came light on accessories. If it had some gravity beams or lightning effects or whatever you want to call them, I think that would make this a perfect set. But overall, it's still a fantastic, fantastic figure, and I'm very, very happy to own it. I think any Godzilla fan would be really happy with this. Thank you so much for watching Mike's Monsters, and I hope you have a fantastic day.